I am the harbor master of Perkins Cove. I am responsible for the mooring, tying up of boats in Perkins Cove. I'm responsible for the maintenance and the upkeep of the facilities here, including the docks and the bridge and other such things. Seeing the people enjoy Perkins Cove, they absolutely love it once they're here. I don't think I've ever had anybody come and stay the night on a boat that hasn't come back. It's just a pleasure to be a part of these people's lives and see the joy that you can have with them.
The cove was dredged in 1941, and you would see photographs of men in wagons harvesting the salt marsh hay, and the Josias River would trickle through and then exit right in front of the island house out to sea. And many of the dories were moored in the outer cove right past the Woodbury studio, and during storms the dory fishermen would bring in their dories into the safer harbor, which wasn't even dredged, it was just a hayfield at the time. In the early days you would travel down Orweed Cove Road, and it would be a very, very narrow road. It wasn't even paved in those days, and you would pass Barnacle Billy's, which would be actually the garage, and then it became the Brush and Needle. It's an art store, and you travel down. It was very, very different in those days. Another interesting building is the shack. It's the Lobster Shack. But in its day, it was quite a gathering place for the dory fishermen. It was built from beams from an old shipwreck, and many of the dory fishermen had fish houses that they would stay in and broker their fish. And when the artists came, the artists then again would make paintings, do paintings of the fishermen, and there was a wonderful relationship between the fishermen and the artist. And also, there's another building beyond. That building is called the Ice House. And Hamilton Easter Field, he built that ice house, and behind the building there was a little shop that they had art supplies in. And also Hamilton Easter Field put in the first light pole. And also, what is Barnacle Billy's now was the garage that was used for the island house that Hamilton Easter Field lived in. And they would have gatherings there on Thursday nights, and it was called the Field Forums. It was interesting that we had two art schools. One was on one side of the cove and one was on the other. This property is called the Woodbury Studio. It was an art school that was built by Charles Woodbury. He started the first art school in Ogunquit. He had many students come from Boston. The building was built in 1898. The second part of the building was built in 1914, and the third part was built in 1924. There are a few other buildings in Perkins Cove that I'd like to tell you about. The one behind me is now called Mountaintops, but that was the site of the Hamilton Easter Field Art School. And there's, in some of the old books, you can see the students sitting on the steps, but that's been covered over now. But it was a very well-known art school. And also there's another building next to that, which is the Red House. That was a fisherman's house at one time. And next to that is a studio, and Bert Lahr used to stay there, and Sheridan. There were a lot of famous actors that rented that place. And there's a building that's in front of that, has a red umbrella up on the deck. Well, that was the building that Betty Davis rented. She came here from Lowell with her mother, and she would rent from our family. And before 1962, that building was actually on the ground, and it was lifted up in 1962. So not only does the cove have interesting history of dory fishermen, and artists, but there were theater people here also. The house behind me is called the Island House. Hamilton Easter Field bought that house and renovated it. He was an amateur architect and also a patron of the arts, and started the School of Art in Perkins Cove. In years prior, the river would come through the cove, and it would exit between the island house and where that boat ramp is. And before they dredged the cove in 1941.
The early history about Perkins Cove, actually it was founded as a fish cooperative in 1859. There were, I believe it was 17 fishermen who bought the rights to the property, which gave them to the low tide mark, and they could build their fishing shacks. Basically it is fishing village until the 1950s, 1960s. With the advent of the artist colony, there was more need for boarding houses to put up the artists that came to the summer art schools. Eventually the fishing dissipated and tourism moved in. The shack, which has been in the cove for many, many years, it probably was an original shack in the 1860s, belonged to Perkins, and in the 50s it became Maxwell and Perkins Lobster Pound, and he's eventually evolved into the restaurant that it is today.
The winters are totally different than the summer. A lot of people don't realize it. No, I have to break the ice every day to make so the fishermen can get to their boats in case there's a boat leaking or they want to go fishing. The harbor has to be kept clear. I have to shovel off the wharfs and now the bridge to keep that clear for pedestrian traffic. I plow snow for the town in the wintertime, so this is my area to plow, so I'm plowing Perkins Cove. And basically it's keeping up to date with the moorings and stuff. That's when I fix things, is in the wintertime as far as the mooring chains go. When the boats are not here, it's much easier to fix the moorings and the mooring chains. And basically it keeps me busy most of the winter.
Well, there's one birdhouse that's really, it's a special birdhouse. It's the Sylvester birdhouse. It's my favorite birdhouse out of every one in the Harbmaster Shack. It's very popular to the tourists because everybody thinks that when a bird goes in there, the tail wags. So I've been looking at it for a while, and I found out that it wasn't real, so yeah.
We have a very sustainable lobster industry right now, so that some young fellows such as yourself can join in and become lobstermen if they care to. There'll always be moorings available. We're a commercial harbor, so the Army Corps of Engineers takes care of us as far as dredging goes or any major problems that we may have. And it will always be here. The bridge will always be here. The bridge will always go up and down, and basically it won't change a lot.
Read about. Oh, Magic Pickles is here. Sorry.
Why don't you stop rolling?